although he's not there yet, I do think A.J. Brown is becoming the greatest Philadelphia Eagles wide receiver of all time. I'll tell you why coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Louie DiBiase. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Today officially started OTAs for the Philadelphia Eagles. They are getting ready to kick off the 2025 season. Got OTAs today, got training camp in less than 2 months at this point. We're only 100 days away. It's insane, but we are 100 days away from the Week 1 season opener between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys. There's actually been 109 days that have passed since the Super Bowl. So we are closer to the 2025 season than we are to Super Bowl 59. That kind of makes me sad a little bit, to be honest. Like, I'm really excited about 2025. I miss football like crazy. I'm an addict. I want it 365 days a year, especially for the podcast. When the dead zone of the offseason hits like right now, it stinks. There's not a lot of football news going on. But it makes me sad because you're only the defending champs for so long, and maybe the Eagles repeat next year. But I remember just trying to soak in every moment of that 2017, 2018 offseason, being the champs and everything that comes with that. Because once the season starts, that's kind of all over with. Now you're going to rationally get mad again about a week 3 decision on 3rd and 7 in the second quarter. So I don't want to not be champs still. I mean, they're going to be champs until next February and maybe even after that. But I enjoyed the 2024 season so much. And that was my favorite team in franchise history. And I'm enjoying them being champs so much that I do kind of want to wait a little. Like, I want this offseason to slow down just so I can continue to enjoy being Super Bowl champions. That's not that you could do that for the rest of your life. But when you're actually the reigning champs, there's something different about that. It hits different. And I remember how fast time went by. After Super Bowl 52, soon after that, it was like, okay, we haven't won a championship in 2 years. 4 years. Holy crap, we're coming up on the 7th, 8th year anniversary of that win. It's almost been a decade at this point. Time flies. So I'm enjoying being the champs, but again, the NFL offseason flies. The Eagles hit the field today at the NovaCare Complex for OTAs. What I'm looking at the most is Kevin Patullo. I'm really intrigued by Kevin Patullo as the new offensive coordinator, as the new play caller. Yet again, another play caller for Jalen Hurts. What is it, his 10th play caller in his career, from Alabama to Oklahoma to the Philadelphia Eagles? That's going to be the biggest thing. And of course, we're not going to learn a whole lot. They're not going to show anything crazy schematically on the field for OTAs or training camp. Patullo talks to the media tomorrow. It's not like he's going to give you a whole lot of insight about what his plan is or who he's going to be as a play caller, but at the same time, it will be interesting to hear his thoughts, his philosophies about calling plays, about if he's going to throw the football more this year, what he thinks is a strength or a weakness, about like what it takes to become a good play caller, especially when you haven't called plays before, the different roles he's played. I'd love to hear more from other players about what they're seeing from Patullo. There's a lot of pressure on Kevin Patullo. We have seen in the past seasons having a bad play caller can hold a team back, even with a ton of talent. We saw that 2 years ago. We saw that after Super Bowl 52 with the decisions that Doug Peterson made. We've seen how not getting these decisions right at coordinator can cause, in-house turmoil between the head coach, who has gained more power after winning a championship, the power struggle between him and the general manager and owner, who might want more say if an internal promotion doesn't work. So again, Kevin Patullo doesn't have to come in and reinvent the wheel. I think he has so much talent on this offense that they're going to be a top 5 unit probably no matter what, right? But at the same time, we have seen, again, play callers hold back really talented offenses almost identical to this one. Look at 2023. I do not think Brian Johnson or Nick Sirianni, who was calling plays, whether we want to believe it or not, at certain times in that season, both of them, I feel like, held this offense back. So Patullo doesn't have to do anything crazy, but I do think he has to have his own vision. He can't come in 2025 and say, we're going to do exactly what we did in 2024. A.J. Brown said it best this offseason. You have to evolve. Even when you were the most dominant Super Bowl champion potentially in NFL history, or at least top 5, as Saquon Barkley said last week, you can't just say, we're going to do exactly what we did the year before and run it back. That's how you get the disappointing 2018 season. That's how you get the disappointing 2023 season. So Petula doesn't have to come in and be Andy Reid. But at the same time, I do feel like he has to come in with his own vision, his own plan. And that's what I'm going to be watching for the most in OTAs, is if we can get any sort of hints of what's coming up. Hearing him talk to the media tomorrow is going to be really intriguing, just to pick his brain about his philosophy, about, if they need to give Saquon Barkley the ball less this year, if there needs to be more balance on offense, how do you start games fast in the first quarter? People forget, because of how dominant they were the second half of the season, how much of a problem that was for this football team, was starting fast in the first half of games. How do you adjust in the second half? Petulo's never done this before. And Nick Sirianni, he's showing his belief in him. Internal promotion. I'm just skeptical, and I'm watching it a lot because this hasn't really worked out with Press Taylor and with Brian Johnson. So we'll see if maybe third time's the charm with Kevin Petullo. It looks like the players believe in him. The one part about it that I do like is that Petullo is consistent. He's not Kellen Moore, but he was a part of that offense last year, so Jalen Hurts isn't going to see a whole lot of turnover. And I think he was important in meshing those concepts between Nick Sirianni's offense, who he helped, run that offense from 2021 to 2023, and he kind of helped mesh those ideologies with Kellen Moore. So hopefully he's got a good idea of, since he's been here, of what's going to work and what's not. But I think, again, heading into now, like OTAs are starting soon, before you know it, training camp and the preseason will be here. What am I watching for the most this summer? It's Kevin Petullo at offensive coordinator. And of course, positional battles like right guard and linebacker and safety, and some depth battles at wide receiver, running back, so on and so forth. But I feel like the one real legit question about a coach or a player that has like really heavy impact on this year's success of the Philadelphia Eagles is what Kevin Petullo is going to do as a play caller. So that's, to me, with OTA starting, what I'm watching for the most. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, we're going to continue GOAT Week. Who are the greatest Eagles wide receivers of all time and running backs? We'll get into that coming up next. We'll start with receiver. I don't know if he's there yet, but I think A.J. Brown is soon going to become the GOAT at wide receiver. I'll tell you why coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. That Timberwolves Thunder game last night was incredible. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, you can call him the free throw merchant all you want. That dude was dominant in Minnesota. It's been a hell of a playoff run. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action, especially this year in the NBA. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and to win big. I actually did a 2-leg parlay. I like to fade what I'm cheering for, so I wanted the Minnesota Timberwolves to win yesterday. I wanted Anthony Edwards to show up SGA. But it's a win-win if I bet the opposite direction, because if I don't get what I want from a rooting perspective, at least I win some money, and that's what happened yesterday. I took Anthony Edwards under 27.5 points on FanDuel, and I parlayed it with a Thunder money line win, and I won big. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. That's all you got to do. Place $5, and if that bet wins, I'm going Knicks money line tonight. So if you want to bet that on $5, I think you're going to get $200 back in bonus bets. Again, $5 bet wins. No matter what, you'll get $200 back in bonus bets. So make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. It's GOAT Week. We are going through the greatest Eagles of all time at each position. I've been ranking my top 5 starting yesterday with quarterback. It was Jalen Hurts, Nick Foles, Donovan McNabb, Randall Cunningham, Carson Wentz. Those are my top 5 Eagles quarterbacks of all time. And I wanted to do this, what's the right word I'm looking for? This exercise this week, because after a Super Bowl win that featured not only, I think, the greatest team in franchise history, the 2024 Philadelphia Eagles, but I think a top 5 all-time team in the NFL, when that team wins a championship and beats a team like the Chiefs to stop a three-peat, takes down yet another GOAT himself and Patrick Mahomes, just like they did Tom Brady in 2017, that changes legacies. That changes the franchise's history. Suddenly, new players are put on a new pedestal. And I think you have to reevaluate the GOAT conversation about where players find their place in the Eagles' history. And Jalen Hurts is the perfect example of that. Jalen, before last year, I'd say was a top 5 quarterback in franchise history, but would I put him ahead of Nick Foles, who got it done and won a Super Bowl? No, I wouldn't put him ahead of Nick Foles. Would I put him ahead of Donovan McNabb? Not yet. Whereas now, he's number 1. Jalen Hurts is absolutely the GOAT. So when it comes to wide receiver, Eagles right now are in like the golden era of their receiver story. I mean, A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith, that is the greatest 1-2 punch the Eagles have ever seen at wide receiver, over Harold Carmichael and Mike Quick, over DeSean Jackson and Jeremy Maclin. To me, it's A.J. Brown and DeVonta, like they're the guys. Where do they stack in the Eagles' top 5? Hint, spoiler, they're both in it. I'm not going to say he's number 1 yet, but I think by the end of next year, or maybe the end of 2027, it might only take another year or two. I think eventually, I'm not going to put him there yet. I'm not saying he's the GOAT, but A.J. Brown will become the Eagles' greatest receiver of all time. Like he's on that trajectory. I can't put him ahead of the guy I'm wearing his hat yet, Harold Carmichael, who's a Hall of Fame wide receiver, was ahead of his time. 6'7". He was the tallest, most athletic receiver the NFL had ever seen. He was Calvin Johnson only in the 70s and 80s. Like if you built a receiver in a lab, size, speed, athleticism, wingspan, that was Harold Carmichael. And so when you look at also what he was doing in the 70s and the 80s, he was putting up numbers that, like, yeah, he only had 3 1,000-yard seasons, but in the 70s and 80s, you didn't really throw the football a whole lot. I personally don't believe Ron Jaworski was that great of a quarterback. I don't feel like he had a Joe Montana level quarterback in the 70s and 80s, right? They didn't throw that much, and yet he had 3 1,000-yard seasons, a lot of, 7, 8, 900 seasons, and he did all this in such an efficient way by averaging his 3 1,000-yard seasons. He averaged 16.7 yards a catch, 19.5 yards a catch the year they made it to the Super Bowl, and then 16.9 yards a reception. And then you look at his touchdown consistency. He went like a 5 to 7 year run where he had at least 7 touchdowns, or 8, 9, 10. He had a career high of 11 touchdowns in a season. Like Carmichael did all of this over a 12-year span as well. So like the quantity of time, like the resume, like how long he was dominant in Philadelphia is there, over a decade, 12 years. He helped the Eagles make their first ever Super Bowl. He was a generational talent. Again, 6'7", athletic, fast, crazy wingspan. He was an unbelievable leader and teammate. He helped mentor, Eagles players in the early 2000s as well. His touchdown consistency and his yards per reception were through the roof. That's, to me, the GOAT still. I never got to watch him. And I sometimes, I don't want to say I don't give players from those eras the benefit of the doubt, but I just feel like athletes are superior now. So I tend to lean towards what I've seen, and I think sports are better now than ever. So yeah, sometimes I might discredit them a little bit, but Harold Carmichael's different. I think he could definitely thrive in the modern day NFL. There are some receivers, some players in the past in sports are like, yeah, that guy would never make it in the NFL now. You can't be a 5'9" running back that runs a 5'3" and you can't catch the football. Like that guy's not going to make it in this era of football, or like in basketball. Like some of those guys most of them in the 60s and 70s would have never made it in the modern day NBA. But Harold Carmichael, again, no, like 6'7", fast, built in a lab. That guy could play. Like he is what Randall Cunningham is a quarterback, like, again, ahead of his time. It's cool the Eagles have had multiple players like this. Randall Cunningham was ahead of his time in the 90s, the 80s and 90s. Harold Carmichael was absolutely ahead of his time in the 70s and 80s. So he's number one. I do think give A.J. Brown a year or two. I can't put him in there yet because it's only been 3 seasons. But I think maybe next year, maybe in 2 seasons, he will be the GOAT and Harold Carmichael will be number 2. Just think about it. A.J. Brown already has a Super Bowl ring. He has been to 2 Super Bowls with the Eagles. He's been great in both of those games. He's had 3 dominant, top-of-the-league seasons, multiple back-to-back 1,400-yard years, had another 1,000-yard season this year, despite the Eagles throwing the football less than anybody, was number 1 in pretty much every single coverage statistic there is. So he is literally the most unguardable wide receiver one-on-one. And also another interesting part of this, when you look at 2023, that 7-game run he was on, where he had at least, 120 yards, it was an NFL record. That's one of the best individual runs a player has ever had in Eagles history. And I think that's one of the best runs a receiver has ever had in NFL history. That month and a half, almost those 2 months in 2023, A.J. Brown was literally unguardable. I think he is the most unguardable wide receiver in franchise history. I think he's the most talented receiver, even over Carmichael, who was ahead of his time, over a Terrell Owens, a DeSean Jackson, his counterpart in DeVonta Smith. A.J. Brown is the most talented receiver in Eagles history. You could make the argument he's number 1 right now. I do think, though, again, it's only been 3 seasons. I think it would be tough to put him ahead of Carmichael, so I'll put A.J. Brown 2, and then my top 5 is rounded out with DeVonta Smith is number 3, DeSean Jackson number 4. This one you might not agree with. I have Alshon Jeffrey number 5. So let me explain that bottom 3. So it's Harold Carmichael, A.J. Brown, DeVonta Smith, DeSean Jackson, and Alshon Jeffrey. DeVonta, I actually think there's a scenario, depending on A.J. Brown's future. If there was a time where, they're not throwing the football enough and he does want out, or, injuries catch up to him and he doesn't age as well as DeVonta, maybe the Eagles go in a different route roster building wise and they don't want to spend 2 $25+ million a year contracts on receivers. Maybe there is a time in the Eagles' future where DeVonta is the number 1 guy. I think he could actually become the GOAT eventually, even over Carmichael and Brown, depending on Brown's future. When you think about it, he's the number 1 playoff receiver in franchise history. He has the most receptions and receiving yards in Eagles playoff history. He had the game-winning dagger receiving touchdown in the Super Bowl. He had over 100 yards in the Super Bowl in 2022. He's a consistent 1,000-yard receiver, despite not getting the ball nearly as much as some of these other players. Like, the fact that he gets to 1,000 almost every year is unbelievable. He's one of the most clutch players in franchise history. I would say he's the best route runner in franchise history. Like, DeVonta, I think he's top 3 for sure. And I think there's a scenario, who knows? I think there's a scenario where he's actually number 1, even over A.J. Brown. So I got to put him in my top 3. You guys know DeSean Jackson's my favorite Eagle, literally, of all time. But, DeVonta's ahead of him. Carmichael's ahead of him. A.J. Brown is. D. Jackson's the greatest deep threat of all time. And he won you some massive games as a wide receiver, as a punt returner, in the 2008 season as a rookie, helping them get to an NFC championship. You look at the miracle in the New Meadowlands in 2010, that career high season in 2013 when they won the division. Like, D-Jax was, we all know, he was electric. He was a generational player. He is the GOAT himself at one specific thing. He is the greatest deep threat in the history of the NFL, if you ask me. So he is definitely top 5, but why I don't put him ahead of DeVonta even in the top 3 is he doesn't have the team success. He doesn't have this complete skill set of a DeVonta Smith. He doesn't have the playoff accolades. I'm not trying to, DeSean Jackson I will never discredit. Again, generational player. I actually think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. If you're the GOAT at something, if you're the greatest of all time at something in the NFL, that to me is good enough to put you in Canton. That to me is enough to have him at number 4. And then some people would say, how do you have Alshon Jeffrey ahead of Terrell Owens or Mike Quick or heck, even like a Jeremy Maclin type? Why I put Alshon in there? Yeah, Terrell Owens, the 2004 season was legendary. He helped you make it to the Super Bowl. He on one leg, hit a broken leg in the Super Bowl against the Patriots, dominated in that game. almost helped you win your first ever Lombardi trophy. Like, that was an unbelievable year. But it was only 1 year, and he caused so many problems the following season, so much drama, that I can't put him on that list. Like, I'm sorry, I can't put T.O. in the top 5. When it comes to most talented receivers in franchise history, he's definitely top 5. He's probably top 2, top 3. It's him, Carmichael, and A.J. Brown. If you built a receiver in a lab, Terrell Owens could come out a lot of the times. Like, he's a Hall of Fame wide receiver for a reason. A lot of people say he's a top 5 receiver of all time. But for the Eagles, 2004 isn't enough for me to put him top 5. And Alshon Jeffrey, yeah, the sample size is pretty small too, but Alshon was your wide receiver 1 in the season you won your first ever Lombardi. The guy played through, a torn rotator cuff in his shoulder, caught one of the most ridiculous touchdowns in Super Bowl history. He had over 70 yards in that game. Alshon was super clutch in the playoffs against Atlanta, against Minnesota. That 2018 run as well. I know he dropped the ball against New Orleans, but in that stretch run to get to the playoffs and then in Chicago against New Orleans, he was unbelievably clutch. Alshon Jeffrey, I would say, is top 5. Like, he, again, helped you win your first ever championship. He was your wide receiver 1 for years. And I really love what he did in 2020. I know he was injured most of the year, but his support, his vocal support, getting out there in the field and trying to be a veteran presence for Jalen Hurts, his support for now the greatest Eagles quarterback of all time, to me, is worth also being in the top 5. I think he was a really great teammate. He was selfless. I think he could have put up better numbers in an offense that didn't spread the ball around as much. Alshon's a champion. I'll put him 5 ahead of Terrell Owens. Mike Quick probably had the best numbers of these guys in the top 5. But again, for me, championships mean a lot, especially if you were a key contributor. Sometimes it's quality over quantity. It depends on the situation. I'm going to put Alshon Jeffrey top 5 for my wide receivers. I want to get into running back, though, coming up next. Where does Saquon Barkley fit into this equation? The Eagles have had some unbelievable running backs in franchise history. We'll discuss that coming up right here on Locked On Eagles. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. It's GOAT Week. Who are the greatest Eagles of all time? At each position, we did our top 5 quarterbacks, top 5 receivers. Today, we're going to do top 5 running backs now to round out this Tuesday edition of the show. Saquon Barkley just had, I think, the greatest season a running back has ever had. When you combine the regular season, the playoffs, it was literally the most rushing yards a running back has ever had when you combine the regular season and the playoffs. He was the number 1 reason you won a Super Bowl and stopped a three-peat. When you look at the consistency of his ability to rip off 20 plus, 30 plus, 40 plus, 50, 60, 70 plus yard plays, 70 plus yard touchdowns. It was a historic season. It was, I think, again, the greatest season a running back has ever had. And for him to do that in the modern day NFL in 2024 is unbelievable. Saquon Barkley, kind of like A.J. Brown, I think if you give him, when you add a couple more dominant seasons on top of a historic 2024. When you talk about GOAT Week, that literally was the GOAT season at his position. If he has another, 15 plus 100-yard season this year and the Eagles are competing for a Super Bowl and then he does it again in 2026, 2027, if he's catching the ball more this year, if he stays healthy and he, is really worth that new contract extension, I think, like A.J. Brown, Saquon Barkley will eventually jump a legend in Eagles history. But after just 1 year, despite it being the year for the running back, the ring for the Eagles, I can't yet put him ahead of LeSean McCoy. So my top 5 Eagles running backs of all time. LeSean McCoy, number 1. Saquon Barkley, number 2. Brian Westbrook is number 3. Steve Van Buren, number 4. And then I have Wilbert Montgomery, number 5. LeSean McCoy has to be number 1, right? I mean, he's a Hall of Famer. He's your all-time leading rusher in franchise history. And that's really impressive when you're considering he was only there for, 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13. He was only there for 6 seasons, LeSean McCoy. And he is your leading all-time rusher. The fact that he did that in a small time frame thanks to Chip Kelly, because he traded him away in 2015, It just shows how dominant of a player he was, how historic of a player LeSean McCoy was. He is absolutely going to make it to Canton. I don't know if he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, but he's absolutely getting into Canton. I think he was, you can make the argument, in the open field, when he got past the first level of the football field, when linebackers, corners, and safeties were trying to stop him, he was the most dynamic open field running back the NFL had seen since Barry Sanders. His ability to cut on a dime and literally juke a player out of their body. He juked their soul out of their body. LeSean McCoy's number one. And he was the all-decade team running back of the 2010s. I think he's arguably the best running back of the 2010s over Adrian Peterson, over somebody like Marshawn Lynch. It's LeSean McCoy, Shady McCoy, number 25, Eagles Hall of Famer. He's, to me, number one. But, again, I'm all about legendary seasons. I'm all about championships and playoff performances, legendary moments like Saquon's runs against the Rams and against the Commanders in the NFC title and the receptions he had against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Saquon is close. It's only been 1 year, but give him another year or two of dominance. And because he had literally the greatest season a running back's ever had, I think it'll soon be enough to get ahead of what LeSean McCoy did in 6 seasons. And then Brian Westbrook's number 3. Brian Westbrook, I think you can make the argument, is one of the most underrated players in franchise history. And he's the most underrated running back because he came right before the GOAT himself, LeSean McCoy. But when you look at who Brian Westbrook was for the Eagles, he was not only their number one running back, but for a lot of the majority of Donovan McNabb's prime, he was his number one receiver too. And he returned punts. Like, they put a lot on Brian Westbrook's plate. Listen to some of these receiving numbers from Brian Westbrook. He had a, what's this? 1, 2, 3, 4. He had a 5-season run receiving the ball where he had 73 receptions, 61, 77, 90, and 54. That's like wide receiver 1 reception totals. 703 receiving yards, 616, 699, 771, 402. He had at least 4 receiving touchdowns in 6 straight seasons. 4, 6, 4, 4, 5, 5. That's just catching the football. And then you add on top of multiple 1,000-yard rushing seasons. He had 3 straight seasons of at least 7 rushing touchdowns. Brian Westbrook was legit. And then number 36 goes hard. Great running back number. I think he is so underrated because, and again, I'm younger, so I think he's underrated to a lot of Eagles fans in my demographic. Probably not to, Eagles fans that grew up in the early 2000s that know who he was. But for Eagles fans under the age of 30, I think Westbrook is underrated because he was right before Shady McCoy. But he's definitely top 3. And then I got to respect history. This is kind of like, the Harold Carmichael thing. Ron Jaworski as well at quarterback. Steve Van Buren helped you win back-to-back championships in the 40s. Do I think he's the caliber of athlete, a player of a Ricky Waters, who I left off the list? No. Or my guy Jay Ajayi, or LeGarrette Blount that helped you win the Super Bowl, or Miles Sanders, underrated running back. I think he gets kind of some flack in Philadelphia, but was a steady force on this offense for a few years when you had little to no weapons. Is Steve Van Buren that talent? No, absolutely not. But I have to appreciate history. He was like the first Eagles star. Again, helped you win your first 2 championships. His number 15 is retired in the rafters of the Link. I'm not going to leave him off the top 5 or the top 4, which is Mount Rushmore range. He's on the Eagles Mount Rushmore of running backs. And then same thing with Wilbert Montgomery. He had a really long tenure with the Eagles in the 70s and 80s. Consistently a 1,000-yard runner. Had one of the most famous runs against the Dallas Cowboys in the playoffs. Was your kind of go-to weapon in that offense. So, again, from a team success standpoint, from a longevity standpoint, I don't think Wilbert Montgomery is more talented than Ricky Waters, but Ricky Waters was only an Eagle for 3 years. I don't think he was there long enough or did enough to make an impact enough to be a top 5 player at this position. So that's my top 5 running backs. For now, it's LeSean McCoy at 1, Saquon Barkley at 2, Brian Westbrook at 3, Steve Van Buren at 4, and then I would put Wilbert Montgomery at 5. But special shout out to guys like Ricky Waters, who I absolutely love. I feel like talking about, again, guys ahead of his time like Cunningham and Harold Carmichael, Ricky Waters in the 90s was a modern-day receiving running back. He would be a really good running back in the modern-day NFL. Jay Ajayi, the train. You don't trade for him at the deadline in 2017. without Carson Wentz when Wentz got injured, Jay Ajayi kind of carried your offense for a few weeks while Foles got his land legs back from being at sea, being at a backup quarterback position. Jay Ajayi, like, I love Jay. You gotta give him a special shout out. LeGarrette Blount as well, Corey Clement. There's a lot of good running backs the Eagles have had in their history, but those are the top 5. McCoy, Barkley, Westbrook, Van Buren, and Montgomery. Let me know, what did I get right? What did I get wrong? We're going to continue GOAT Week all throughout the week right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. We'll see you tomorrow. Until then, as always, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.